But despite all of this, the big picture, frustratingly, looks exactly the same. Europe is not doing enough to solve a war on its doorstep. The US is giving Ukraine enough to survive, but not enough to win. Russia, we're told, can't possibly sustain those losses, but is also strong enough to raid the rest of Europe if Putin isn't stopped. And most importantly, neither side wants to blink. As we prepare to record this interview, Trump-brokered peace talks in Geneva have reportedly ended in acrimony. The US president is pushing for Ukraine to make concessions. The Ukrainian president, Volodymyr Zelensky, says that isn't fair and the pressure should be put on Russia. Well, President Zelensky joins me now on Uncensored. President Zelensky, it's great to talk to you again.
Very much, and hello everybody. Maybe good evening, I don't know. We live in different countries, so hello, thank you for invitation for this dialogue.
President Zelensky, I came to Kyiv and interviewed you 4 months into this war, and I was struck then by the extraordinary spirit of you and your First Lady and your people. Ukraine was united, it was resolute, and it was prepared to do whatever it took to win this war. Many people feared that Ukraine would be taken quickly by Russia's forces. That hasn't happened. As we approach the 4th anniversary, what are your feelings about this war and where Ukraine now is?
In today's digital landscape, cyber threats are relentless, with over 13 million DDoS attacks happening a year. But there is a solution. NetScout's Arbor Adaptive DDoS protection is more than just defense. It's proactive security that evolves with your business.
Damn, chat, I don't know. Oh my gosh. This shit is crazy, big dog. Crazy.
It struck me that at the center of all this, in the end, is this debate between all the sides, and you made a point of saying it's a three-way debate.
What's up,
the United States, Russia, and Ukraine.
What's up,
over territory. That ultimately, any peace deal is going to come down to a settlement over territory, and he is not prepared to cede, on behalf of the Ukrainian people, an inch of land in terms of sovereignty. The compromise, as he was putting it to me, is that it may be they freeze this war on current territorial lines, but without any ceding of territory, and they work out security guarantees, which may be for 10, 20 years, whatever it may be, in a way that ensures Putin can't then attack again. What do you make of what he was saying about that?
I think he's starting to acknowledge that his war aims are finally getting worn down. And for that matter, so are President Putin's. One of the reasons they can't come to an agreement is because they still believe in their original war aims. President Putin wants him out. He wants to take Ukraine, and he doesn't want Ukraine to be part of NATO. He doesn't want those security guarantees. President Zelensky wants security guarantees to include being part of NATO, wants to restore his entire landmass to include Crimea, and wants Russians to pay reparations. What has changed in 4 years of war? So I think at the end of the day, if President Trump wears him down and says, we'll offer you those long-term security guarantees for land, I think he's got a choice to make, and his people have a choice to make, which is either continue this slaughter for years and years, or finally come into some sort of Cold War, some sort of frozen conflict inside the country.
I want to play you, General Kimmich, just a clip of what he said about the current state of the battlefield, in the context that there's been a report out today that Ukraine has made more gains in the last 3-4 days than it's made for a very long time in this war. Let's hear what Zelensky had to say.
If you're asking what's going on the battlefield, as I said, didn't get successful stories for them. They try, Russians, they try to sell their audience the successful steps, but they can't really. Even their audience, even their very, that they have this very nationalistic, very radical part of Russia, even they don't trust their government, Putin, because they see that there are no successful steps on the battlefield.
Now, the report I was alluding to said that Ukraine has recaptured territory at its fastest pace in 3 years, 78 square miles between last Wednesday and Sunday, which is equal to Russia's advances for the entire month of December. Should we read anything significant into that? And what do you make of his kind of overview that Russia has failed in its military objectives, which, I remember at the start of the war, the belief was Russia was trying to get this over in a few days, depose Zelensky, take control, and so on. Clearly, that has not been achieved, and they've lost over a million people in terms of death and wounded in this war so far, which is a catastrophic loss for any army. What do you think of the 2 points?
Well, number one, Russia has not achieved its military aims, but in any sense of the word. Number two, with 78 square miles in a country of that size is meaningless. Unfortunately, one of the most prescient articles I ever wrote was in July of 22 in the Wall Street.
The comparison to Flanders, to me, privately, was Donald Trump, President of the United States, who said this is like Flanders. It is open fields, and there are thousands of young men being mown down week after week, month after month, year after year. Let me bring Scott Horton in. Scott, I obviously know your perspective on this war. I thought it was interesting that President Zelensky several times has said to me he's not interested in relitigating Russia's excuses for doing the invasion, or as he put it, all the historical bullshit. And I'm sure that people will take issue with that. But I think what he was really getting at is that we are where we are, and it's kind of meaningless to any resolution now. Would you agree with that? Notwithstanding, I know you wouldn't view what happened before as historical bullshit, but do you agree that we are where we are, and if we need to get to peace, actually it is kind of irrelevant?
No, because if you have to take into account what started the war in order to figure out how to solve it. So, for example, it's going to insist on war guarantees from all the European countries and even the United States, and including hosting European troops on their territory. Well, then obviously that is completely contrary to incentivizing the Russians to compromise and come to peace on their side, since that was one of the major instigators of the war, was the integration of Ukraine into the Western Alliance instead of working on a permanent neutrality, which, as I've said on the show before, even the NATO expanders said all along, well, we're going to have to make a special case for Ukraine and guarantee their neutrality. And then when the policymakers didn't abide by that, starting with George W. Bush, they really put Ukraine on the path to war. And that's the point of my book is, the book is called Provoked, how Washington started this war, not so much Kiev. It's the United States that put them in this position. There's that famous Henry Kissinger quote that says, to be America's enemy is dangerous, but to be America's friend is fatal. And what he was talking about was the kind of things that he would do, which is support people in a fight that they can't win, and then eventually turn around and leave them high and dry, like the Bay of Pigs, or like the Shiite uprising and Kurdish uprising in 1991, or the Hmong tribesmen in Vietnam, or you name it. We'll make big promises and then stab you in the back. And so the Ukrainians, have a right to be resentful. Joe Biden promised them total victory. We will give you whatever it takes to completely defeat the Russians. And based on those promises, they gave up on the peace talks in the early part of the war in 2022. And then the die was really cast, Pierce, in September
What's up,
of
Carlos?
22. Because that is when Ukraine had their best.
Not much. What you got going, man? We in the Discord. If anybody wants to join up and debate, man, drop the Discord link in the chat. If anybody, I'm gonna put it on the community tab while we are in the Discord. How you feeling about this Zelensky interview, Carlos?
I don't think it's going to make a difference in any which way. I mean, they need help. I don't think it's America's guess to a point.
You said you don't think it's America's job to what? What you say, Carlos? Damn, I can't hear nothing. Jared, are you here?
Yeah, I can hear. I'm good.
All right, bet. All right, yeah, I just couldn't hear Carlos no more. Yeah, I'm dropping the link
He
on
was
the.
basically saying what he was basically saying was that he doesn't think that America should be policing the whole world. The U.S. shouldn't be the world's police, is what he's saying.
So where does it stop?
I don't know.
Where should
You
it
have to
stop,
ask him.
Carlos?
Yeah, you have to ask him.
All right, I'm putting it on the community tab wall. If y'all want to join the debate, the Discord is on the community tab wall. Let me get back to this clip.
Day, their best weekend was when they got a real victory in Kharkiv and down in Kherson. But then Putin just got angry, called up 300,000 more troops, and then officially annexed Zaporozhye and Kherson and doubled the size of his territorial claims in the war, which he's still far from achieving. And then, so you mentioned that 78 miles. The only meaningful thing about that really is it reinforces the Ukrainian government's position that they don't want to quit when they haven't lost yet. But of course, the Russians don't want to quit when they are winning, but slowly, and they are far from finished taking even the rest of Donetsk, much less the rest of Zaporozhye and Kherson. So at the rate we're going, this thing could go on for years. And it really is all Washington, and especially Joe Biden's fault for getting the Ukrainians into this position and then refusing to negotiate.
Man, look, y'all, on this Debate Nation Live, I'm finna end this Debate Nation Live. We'll just be in the Discord, talking, debating. I'm gonna go back live on Plug Station, I think.